What if Doctor Who hadn't been axed in 1989? That is something many have tried to guess at, and now it's my turn. I'll be going through this concept at the rate of 1 season per episode. These videos are based on information released by John Nathan Turner, Andrew Cartmel, Ben Aaronovitch, and a lot, and I mean a lot, of guesswork. Season 44 would have been the first season for the 12th Doctor, Paterson Joseph, the first season for the incoming producer, Gary Russell, the first season for the new companion, Angela Jensen, as played by Jacqueline Pearce, the second season for script editor Paul Cornell, and finally the second season of CBS co-producing Doctor Who with the BBC after the Viacom split of 2006. CBS would now go by just CBS and not CBS Paramount Television. This season would also maintain the same format, which started in season 41, of having 8 90-minute episodes in the season. Unlike season 41 to 43, this season would not be serialised, but it would have plot and character arcs developing across each episode. The new companion would have been Jacqueline Pearce, as the Right Honourable Angela Jensen, who would currently be the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, when we meet her in episode 1. Jacqueline Pearce would be no stranger to Doctor Who, having previously appeared in 1985's The Two Doctors. Angela Jensen would have been chosen as a new companion to be a reminder of what he once was as the President of Gallifrey, and while it's never explicitly stated, it would be heavily implied that Angela Jensen is a Conservative Prime Minister, not unlike someone like Margaret Thatcher. This season would also see the introduction of the perception device, which would allow anyone to see the Doctor as someone they expect to see, so we can get into places without needing to have 20 minutes of people not knowing who he is and distrusting him. According to Russell, this would have been to save time in episodes and get straight to the plot, but it would have also been widely considered that it was done, so they wouldn't have to repeatedly deal with the Doctor's race in historical episodes. Because of this success at Doctor Who Revelation, near to the end of the principal photography, Doctor Who received a massive budget increase, which would have been used in post-production. Therefore, the title sequence got a whole new look. The title sequence would have started out with different shots of a faraway sun before we see 2 moons in front of it collide as we enter the vortex. The Doctor Who logo spins around before it flies away from the camera, and then the names Paterson Joseph and Jacqueline Pearce fly past the camera with the occasional asteroid. We then fade back into space and we see the sun from afar, where Paterson Joseph's face fades onto the sun and we get the episode title. John Debney would again do the music for the season, and Gary Russell would have told him to do a new theme tune which would be much more upbeat than his season 43 and Revelation themes, and would show the adventure the Doctor was embarking on. They came up with this. Also beginning after this season would be the third proper Doctor Who spin-off entitled Panopticon, which focused on the Rogue and some other Gallifreyan main cast from the last few seasons. Here is the title sequence from the first season. So be sure to look out for Panopticon Series 1 in your subscription feed soon. Anyway, without further ado, here is Season 44 of Doctor Who. Earth, 2007. Prime Minister Angela Jensen arrives in Downing Street to find that she has a rather peculiar situation to deal with. The Silurians have awoken and they demand their planet back. This episode introduces us to the series and our new companion Angela, the Prime Minister. Like the past few seasons, it's extremely political and we explore the British government's response to the returning villains and previous occupiers of the Earth, the Silurians. We also see the return of Bambera and Unit as they work with the government to find a solution. It's not actually until the 20-minute mark that the Doctor is even introduced, which is a very daring thing to do. We don't need the whole post-regeneration stress stuff, as we had that at the end of Revelation. So Unit contacts him with the space-time telegraph to ask for him for help. He helps them out, and they eventually come to an arrangement with the Silurians. However, around the 60-minute mark it all goes sour, as Angela is kidnapped by a Silurian scientist who begins to experiment on her. We then find out that a mysterious race of new aliens have been working with the Silurians to help them maintain dominance over the Earth. We find out that they are called the Shauka. They live underground in volcanoes and made contact with the Silurians recently and woke some of them up out of their hibernation. They are in fact using them as they know they have the means to take over the Earth, and in that process change the atmosphere to their ideal living requirements. However, it all goes wrong when the Doctor comes down after Angela and finds out what's going on and defeats them, sending the Shauka running and putting the Silurians into deep sleep. The Doctor takes Angela back into the TARDIS to return her to the surface, but the TARDIS is knocked off course as it latches onto an object flying through the vortex. The Doctor says that the TARDIS believes that it's of Shaukan origin, and the end credits roll with Angela being trapped inside the TARDIS against her will, tracking a foreign object throughout time. Chasing a metallic object through the time vortex, the Doctor and Angela find themselves in London during the Blitz. While Angela finds herself in absolute peril hanging from a barrage balloon, the Doctor finds a group of homeless children terrorised by Jamie, an empty child wearing a gas mask. The plague is spreading and the Doctor must stop it. This episode would find the Doctor and Angela in war-torn 1941 London, where they are looking for a metallic object which they think may be a Shauka ship. We meet a character called Lieutenant Fassel, who is one of the surviving Balochians who has gone back in time to try and prevent Balons from being destroyed, but has been trapped in World War II. The Doctor and Angela are separated, and the Doctor finds a young woman looking after some children who's been stalked by a child in a gas mask. Turns out that the metallic object that was crashed was a Gallifreyan time ship which was in pursuit of Lieutenant Fassel and was sent in fact by the Rogue. The nanogenes inside the ship leaked out and they were programmed to heal everything they came across, and the first human they came across was a boy in a gas mask, so they took that template for everyone. The Doctor manages to reset the template and calls the Rogue. He tells the Rogue to leave the Balochians alone and make sure all time ships are secured, and the nanogenes have templates of all species that the Matrix has catalogued. The Doctor then fixes Lieutenant Fassel's ship and tells him to be on his way. This episode would have been written by former script editor Stephen Moffat, who had previously penned Season 42's Evolution of the Matrix, which fans considered as a relatively mediocre episode. The initial reaction to Moffat returning to write for season 44 was a fairly negative, as they believed he had had his time, but most people's mind would change when this episode aired, as many considered it one of the best stories of the past few years. The TARDIS lands on Miasma Agoria, the Rani's planet. Thankfully for the Doctor, the Rani's nowhere to be seen, or anyone else for that matter. The planet is completely deserted, and there has got to be a reason. This episode sees the return of the Rani and explores her planet, Miasma Agoria, which has been alluded to many times. We see the Rani ruling over it and her conducting experiments on its people. In the end, the Doctor liberates the planet and sends the Rani back to Gallifrey. "1962. The Doctor is a Secret Service agent and Angela is a government official. In Russia, the Zukhanovsky volcano has erupted and the Shalka are suspected. The Doctor must play a secret agent to investigate. As the TARDIS crashed, it cannot travel in space any longer, but can only travel in time, and only 2 more times." This episode will be the Doctor Who Does James Bond episode, and the episode does acknowledge that it is a bit James Bondy, with the Doctor and Angela both referencing it as they impersonate MI6 agents to try and find the Shalka, who they believe are hiding out in a Russian volcano. This episode would have been lots of fun and would have shown a slightly campier Doctor Who, and this would have the feel of the 60s James Bond films. Colour would have been used for this episode advantage, giving it a 1960s Technicolor feel. In one scene, Angela would have ended up meeting the UK Prime Minister, Harold Macmillan, and the interaction between him and Angela would have been one of the more comedic moments of the episode. Macmillan would have been played by special guest star Hugh Grant with a false moustache, and both Alan Rickman and Billie Piper would have appeared, fulfilling the role of the campy villain and the Bond girl, respectively. The Doctor and Angela land right in the middle on the human race's bloodiest periods of history. This is full-scale war against the Whirring. They are locked in a deadly struggle for survival with the human race. Trying to make a difference here would be like standing up and calling for a ceasefire on the Somme. Certain death. This episode would feature the return of the Whirring from the season 12 story The Ark in Space. It would have been written by Nicholas Briggs, director since 1994, writer of The Time Ravagers, Terror of the Stars and The Sound of Life, who also has voiced the Daleks on and off since the 90s. This episode would focus on a war between the humans and the Whirring, far into the future, and would be one of the more cerebral episodes of the season. It would also feature a brief appearance from Lieutenant Fassel. However, this episode would have been seen as one of the weakest of the season, as the Doctor takes an end justifies the means approach with the Whirring towards the end of the story, and fans and viewers would have believed this was slightly out of character. Also, this episode had a much lower budget than what it probably should have had, as most of the budget was spent on other stories. However, fans would have liked the new CGI design of the Whirring, which most of this episode budget was spent on. It would have looked much better than the original and made the Whirring seem quite scary. There would also have been some nice CGI establishing shots, but that's as far as the budget would have spread. Hurrah! The deadly Daleks are back. Yes, those lowball tin pot tyrants have another plan to invade our world. Maybe this time because they want to drill into the Earth's core, or maybe because they just feel like it. And when those pesky pepper pots are in town, there's only one thing you can be sure of. There'll be non-stop high-octane mayhem in store, and plenty of exterminations, but never fear, the Doctor is on hand to sort them out. Defender of the Earth, saviour of them all with his assistant, Angela Jensen by his side. who will fight once again to uphold the beliefs of the English Empire. All hail the glorious English Empire. Now that sounds like a jubilee worth celebrating, does it not? This episode will be set in an alternate 2007 created by the Doctor and Angela when they slipped back into 1907 and saved England from a Dalek invasion which stopped the British Empire from falling and instead adopting a Dalek technology and ideals, mutating into a far more racist, violent and generally psychotic English Empire, which had reconquered the USA and pretty much ruling the world at this point, while steadily growing ever more insane and hateful due to the government and society desperately trying to emulate the Daleks. The English Empire in this universe would be taking all the worst traits of the Nazis and taking it and is ruling the world. The English Empire would also started travelling to the stars with Dalek technology and it's enslaved a race called the Archonauts, and they are commonly publicly tortured and executed for their own enjoyment after running out of Daleks. The Doctor and Angela arrive in the Tower of London where they meet the President of the English Empire. After earning his trust of being the valiant hero from 100 years ago, he's taken to see the last surviving Dalek locked up in the Tower. The President's wife and Angela begin to plan a revolution using the last Dalek on the day of the Jubilee. The Dalek is given back its gun and they go to the Jubilee celebration. The Doctor is forced to give a grand speech to the population but decides to explain to them that he can't blame the cultural memory of the Daleks for their misery, and they are exactly like the Daleks, and they exemplify how a society collapses in on itself when given absolute power. The President's wife, in a fit of insanity, takes this opportunity to depose her husband and decides that the Daleks would make a fine ruler and has to become the last Dalek's wife. At this point, the realities 2007 and 1907 emerge, causing the Dalek invasion feat to materialise at the Jubilee celebrations. The last Dalek, who is driven insane by Angela's kindness to him, exterminates the Supreme Dalek and orders every Dalek on Earth to self-destruct, which destroys the entire invasion fleet in 1907 and restores the reality back to how it should be. This episode will be one of the most popular of the season and would show a fundamental development in Angela's character arc as she decides to do something for the good of humanity by herself, and she realises that she actually quite enjoys travelling with the Doctor. In 1926, Agatha Christie mysteriously disappears, only to be found 10 days later at Harrogate Hotel with no memory of what happened to her. What could have been the cause? Was it a nervous breakdown? Was it a cry for help? Or did it involve a giant alien wasp and a mysterious stranger known only as the Doctor? This would be our first celebrity historical since 2003's The Curse of the Tower. This episode would feature the Doctor and Angela wrapped up in a murder mystery with Agatha Christie, and would reveal the truth behind her disappearance in 1926. This story would be mainly a comedy story, and would give the show some relief between the last episode and the next one. Angela now has begun enjoying travelling with the Doctor more, and is allowed to have some fun in the past meeting one of her idols, Agatha Christie. There'd be a big cast of all the usual people involved in a murder mystery, and the whole thing would be very formulaic with a Doctor Who twist. The twist being that the murderer is a giant wasp, who is an agent of the Shelter, and was the unknown son of Lady Edison, their host at the garden party, and a Vesper form 40 years previously. This story would end with Agatha losing her memories and ending up 10 days later at the Harrogate Hotel after being dropped off there by the Doctor and Angela. Fans' only real problem with the story was that the giant wasp seemed too familiar in feel to the Worm just a couple of stories ago, and a few viewers were confused to whether they're supposed to be the same species. The story would finish on a cliffhanger with Angela being kidnapped by the Shellcat and the Doctor running into the TARDIS to try and get her back. The Doctor lands the TARDIS in the village of Lannet in Lancashire after following the Shelter that kidnapped Angela there. The Doctor finds the village silent. Its inhabitants are all living in fear except for a barmaid, Lizzie Clark. The Shelter has taken up residence beneath Lannet in a preparation for a wider invasion. The Doctor, aided by Lizzie, must find Angela and in turn save the world of a full-scale invasion. This episode wraps up the Shelter storyline and also introduces a new companion, Lizzie Clark, who would go on to travel with the Doctor and Angela at the end of this episode. We start with the Doctor landing in the quiet village of LEESON after tracking the Shulker back there. He enters the pub where he meets the barmaid, Lizzie. Before long, however, the Shulker find the Doctor and attack him. However, the Doctor manages to break away as he work out they're probably under the village. The Shulker capture the TARDIS and proceed to pry it open with the help of Angela against her will. The Doctor decides to call in UNIT for some help, and it's not long before Barbera arrives and she begins evacuating the village. The Doctor takes UNIT underground to the Shulker lair, and he finds Angela and Lizzie both being tortured. The Doctor saves Angela and Lizzie, but the Shulker grab hold of him and lock all three of them up. The Doctor notices that Angela has a wound in her head, and she explains that she's had a headache ever since they took her. The Shulker take the Doctor, Angela and Lizzie to their space-time tunnel to their home world and explain that it can transport thousands of their troop across light years. However, it can also be turned into a big black hole, and they use it to dispose of their waste. The Doctor pleads for Angela and Lizzie's life, but before long he is thrown in. Lizzie and Angela break free of the Shulker's grasp and run into the TARDIS. Angela, however, is dragged back out. We see the Doctor fading into the black hole, projecting himself into the TARDIS psychically. He explains to Lizzie how to fly the TARDIS, and the TARDIS materialises around him, saving him. For some reason, Angela is freed and sent back up to the surface. The TARDIS materialises back in Barbera's office. The Doctor finds out that UNIT had captured the Shulker and goes and looks at it. However, the Shulker breaks out and screams as it kills its victims. Barbera explains that none of the evacuees have arrived and have all shown up in the middle of nowhere instead. UNIT finds Angela, and out of the wound in her head, a Shulker limb climbs out. It screams and controls everyone. The Doctor lands the TARDIS in amongst the people and rescues Angela. He explains that the Shulker are controlling people through Angela's body, but he soon rips out the Shulker limb and stops the screaming. Back at UNIT, the Doctor explains that the screams forms the nitrogen and oxygen in the planet's atmosphere to change it to their environment so they can survive on our planet. Screams start again soon after, and the Doctor takes Angela and Lizzie back to the Shulker lair. The Doctor confronts the Shulker Prime, as the Doctor screams back in a perfect key, intent to distract the Shulker Prime, as he changes the space-time channel back into a black hole as it begins to shut the Shulker Prime in. The Doctor tells Angela to take the limb back into her brain so she can be plugged into the Shulker network. She becomes the centre of the Shulker operations and tells all Shulker and humans to be free and stop screaming. All the Shulker blow up, and the Doctor quickly gets a limb out of Angela's head before it blows up. They return to the service, and the Doctor offers Lizzie the chance to join him as a travelling companion on the presumption that Angela will want to stay on Earth. However, Angela tells the Doctor that she wouldn't mind taking a scenic route back to Downing Street. And with that, the credits roll. There you have it, season 44. A very popular season of Doctor Who, putting Doctor Who on what some fans would consider the right road, but also continuing what we had in season 41 to 43 and what we got in Revelation, and also setting up in part and also alluding to the new spin-off Panopticon, which will be starting a few months after this, which you need to remember to watch. Remember that in your subscription fee, Panopticon. Until Panopticon season 1, goodbye.